All our museums and cities are full of statues of heroes, and many of them are associated with military heroism. But I think real heroism will involve something called the heart. And the word heart can be used in two different senses. First of all, it can mean something to do with passion, something to do with putting all your energy into one specific cause. It could mean infer a sense of courage. But without this heart involved in it, in the second sense, that is, without compassion, without love, true heroism I don't think exists. You can have heroes who are heroic in battle, and all of us can be heroic from time to time, in the sense that we can muster forbearance, we can muster courage, and so on. But can we sustain it for very long? And those who can sustain it for a long time, consistently, we can certainly sing their praises as heroes. But why do I mark out heroism? Or at least heroine, heart of a heroine, is because love is more emphasized in the heroine than it is in the hero. And we can see that. We find many examples. Let us say Napoleon, who fights many battles with great ingenuity, great courage in the face of unfair odds. We can see many famous battles where people offer their entire life. And sometimes it is also accompanied by fear. Fear of what is the alternative. And so there are a number of different dimensions to it. But true heroism really comes from the feminine quality, if you want to call it that, of pure love, a heart, wonderful compassion, offering your whole life for another cause. Now, Sister Nivedita has this on her memorial, that she gave her life to India. Now, imagine if you give your life for a cause without any idea of what are the merits or demerits to you personally. Just simply, again, out of love. In this case, out of love for India. But why India? What was so special about India? It's because there was a certain preparation. All of us have a kind of destiny. And we find if we study Sister Nivedita's life, there is evidence of a continuous unfolding of destiny everywhere. Starting from, let us say, the very unfortunate demise of her father. He was only about 30 years of age, and she was only about 10. That was a great tragedy. The separation from her family at a very young age, where she lived with her grandmother, that's fine, and only met her sister at the age of 3. The inclination she had toward being an educator, and then not just an educator, but an innovative one, so that at some point in her ultimate teaching career, very, very young, she was a co-principal of a school, and then eventually having her own school, and decided in a revolutionary way to employ state-of-the-art educational techniques of her day. This is all marks of a remarkable woman who felt, I can be independent of common thinking. She was brought up as a Wesleyan or a Methodist or Congregationist, very similar thing, but started independently researching. And she would register herself as a Christian, no doubt, but she found that Christianity did not really give her, or those who she asked or she explored, didn't really give her the answers to the most profound questions. And she was happening then to explore this light of Asia called Buddha and Buddha's life. And when she was at Wimbledon, where she had her school, her proximity to London itself gave her access to like-minded revolutionary thinkers, the intelligentsia of her day. She met these. She also became involved in the administrative way of their particular club, the Sesame Club, a founder member. She was involved very much in that. She was a contributor of articles. There was everything in her life was remarkable. And then, of course, she happened to meet Swami Vivekananda, 1905, the winter of 1895, the winter of it. And that was just a turning point. In him, she recognized a lifelong guru, a teacher, and she also recognized her destiny. And he recognized her destiny, and he called her. Now imagine a situation where you go to a country unfamiliar in Victorian days where you're dressed up not for a tropical climate at all, where you're surrounded by unfamiliar scenes. Swami Vivekananda would have known this. Sorry. You have a question? And so try to warn her of the discomforts of this foreign land. And just in case she got the wrong idea, took her and others off to Kashmir and other places where he exposed to her the real India. What's the significance of India? We are a Vedanta society teaching the Vedanta philosophy, a universal philosophy that gives you access to your inherent freedom. And therefore, it is the highest offering that can be made to mankind. And then part of that destiny was very clear, that when Swami Vivekananda did pass away, it was Sister Nivedita who carried through his voice. You can clearly see it in her lectures, in her writings, in her mindset. So that the freedom, even the political freedom of India, was the road, really, to the propagation of this universal philosophy of Vedanta. That is much needed today. Now, it requires various qualities for that. The heart, above all else. The heart in both of these senses. The heart, not only the passion for it, but also the love, the emotional side, the empathy, the compassion, that has to be there. And it was purely out of compassion that our Sister Nivedita decided to uplift women, decided to be an educator for women, empower women way, way before her time. We talk about women's empowerment. We talk about women's equality. But she had this idea way before. And she had the idea really from Swami Vivekananda. And he had this idea from Ramakrishna Paramhansa, who registered every woman, every female, as an embodiment of the divine Shakti, the divine energy. And we've just done a meditation on energy as a theme. And there was also a question about energy here. Energy we call prana, that means energy. And sometimes we confuse these terms. In the 1960s, I went to a yoga class, and there was a teacher there saying, now let us breathe in the prana, as if it was a component in the air like nitrogen or something. So this is a completely wrong idea. Prana is evident in us as the heartbeat. Prana is within us and evident as the flow, the current of thought that we find we're dealing with, that appears every moment. It comes as the act of the movement of the lungs, the movement literally of the diaphragm muscle moving up and down. And we know, and Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras puts it to us, that the reverse of concentration is, among other symptoms, grief and so on and so forth, is irregular breathing. When we catch ourselves in irregular breathing, let us say we've caught ourselves in a fit of reactive emotions such as anger, then the heart is racing and the breathing is very quick. And actually, you could simulate that by making the breathing very fast. And you'll see the effect on the mental field. Will be agitated. Conversely, when you calm your breathing down, the proverbial counting to 10, you're taking charge of the nervous system. And the nervous system is including the neurological complex, which is called the brain. The brain and the sympathetic nervous system is one unit. What we call the spine and the brain is one unit. If you want to detach the brain from the spine, you have to take an operation for it. Now you see this whole sympathetic nervous system sending currents of energy throughout the body in 5 different directions according to the yogis. One direction would be upwards, controlling the upper part of the body. One downwards, controlling the final part of the body, the ultimate eliminative part of the body and digestive part. There's an equalizing breath, samana. And then there's an overall breath as well. 5 of these are present. And so prana seems to be dividing itself in this way. And how do we stabilize that if our normal life is upsetting to it? And we can upset it very easily. And I do it in a very impressive, I may say, demonstration. Those who know me will know what I do. And we do it through muscle testing because the nervous system controls the muscles. And when a person is nicely stabilized and so on, you give a person a shock, immediately the equilibrium is upset. Immediately. Not only that, but you can do it remotely by looking at a person. You know, you may be walking down the street and have a feeling somebody's watching me. Yes, okay. Because our electromagnetic field, if you like, doesn't seem to have any borders, and prana also has no borders. Now, when we take this energy and gather it in and really, really concentrate it in terms of our actions, this amounts to what we call heroism. And Sister Nivedita had this capacity to gather everything in and to concentrate. How do we know this? We know is because of her prolific writing, her prolific work, her work ethic, working day and night. There's a witness to this. It's in a book by one of her students. She tells it a little bit like this. She says, for a person who has renounced everything, is shunyata, the void, is only a abode that cannot be. And so she remarks, Nivedita understood this and has written about her master Swamiji. It was not that he was simply a man of total renunciation. His intense love and yearning for his motherland are beyond comparison. And this is what she herself caught. She caught the infection of Swami Vivekananda's enthusiasm and love for his motherland, knowing that his motherland had a role, a universal role on the world stage, had something profound to offer that was the panacea for all ills and all difficulties. I think I mentioned it before, but a few weeks ago, we had a conference celebrating United Nations Peace Days on peace. And one contributor mentioned, in response to the question, who are the peacemakers? He said, you are the peacemakers. And I remarked, well, actually, yes, a select few may well be, but the vast majority of people, they don't want peace at all. They like peace as an ideal. They think it's wonderful. But an ideal is just an ideal unless you actually do something about it. Now, in a faraway place, what can we do? Well, there's nothing physically that we can do. But we ourselves can remain calm about it. We ourselves can engender the quality of peace within ourselves. If we are peaceful and everybody really desires peace, not the kind of peace that says, leave me alone, don't disturb my peace, but the kind of peace which is a beaming peace that goes along with all these qualities that, summarized, we call heroism, and that are contained in heroines. Why heroine? It takes us away from the idea of a militant hero, a kind of archetypal hero who may or may not have moral values, may have sometimes, at other times not. And of course, we have some great examples of these heroes. We've just completed the series of the Ramayana, where Rama is the hero, and we find many heroic people contained in this, and also the other epic, the Mahabharata. Many examples of how to act heroically. In the Bhagavad Gita, we find this is the first chapter and the second chapter. Second chapter is Krishna supplying what is needed to somebody in distress. What does he give him? Self-confidence. That's the first thing. Be confident, have faith in yourself above everything else. On what basis? On the basis that you are Atman. Today we went and inaugurated a shrine with some devotees in the morning, and I asked them, please pick up the Bhagavad Gita, open any passage. It happened to be chapter 2, the 20th stanza. There straight away, it says, you see, never were you born. You are never born, you never die. You are the immortal, you are the infinite, invisible God. It goes on like that, you see. And that means when you really understand that, at that point, of course, then there's no distress. There's no dilemma. At that point, you have peace. And if we truly wanted it, there'd be no domestic violence. There'd be no social upheavals. There'd be no psychology or need for psychological counseling, psychiatry. There'd be no need for peace negotiations. Nobody would be at war. Everybody would settle their land and have goodwill for everybody without the fear of being taken advantage of. If this is truly our desire, and what I remarked on that occasion was, in the Democratic People's Republic of Congo, where there's been a raging war for a long time, United Nations Peace Force going in, adding to the conflict, to the extent that the government has said there, please, United Nations, withdraw your troops. They have no value here and are exacerbating the difficulty. So all of these qualities that are necessary, beaming and contributing, the question of forbearance in every circumstance as a habitual, constant feature of your personality, all of this contributes toward what we call heroism. And so we have this wonderful heroine in Sister Nivedita who emulates the great hero, Master Swami Vivekananda himself. She says, Nivedita did not work merely through a sense of duty. Rather, she poured her heart's love into her work. What beautiful language. She poured her heart's love into her work. Duty keeps a distance from the task to be done, while love mingles and merges itself in it. Charity performed as a duty is done out of a sense of pity, while the charity that springs out of love is as though it is for a much beloved friend. It gives everything, even life. And a part of heroism is not to be concerned with what other people think, to be independent and enough to assert your power. And we are told that Sister Nivedita, when she walked into a room, you could feel her presence. She had a presence about her, a mixture of sternness, a mixture of authority and compassion and love. And this, of course, makes a wonderful educator. You have to have this wonderful mixture of these two things. She says, Charity that springs out of love is as though it is for a much beloved friend. It gives everything, even life. And she remarks, by loving India, Nivedita gave her own life. And we have that saying, no greater love does a man have than to give up his life. She didn't work for her cause through a sense of duty at all. Sometimes she says Nivedita would talk to the girls about her own teacher, Guru Swami Vivekananda, and at the mere mention of his name, she would be overwhelmed with such great emotion that it became impossible for her to say much about him. So here we have the dynamics of the teacher whose shadow lived with her perpetually, who was the great example that she tried to emulate on the one side. And on the other side, this deep love and deep loyalty that she had to him. And her destiny is what we mentioned, to carry out his message and his work in her own way. While speaking of him, she used to say over and over again, his name was Vireshwar. He was the God of the brave. The brave of the world will follow in his footsteps. All of you leave your little regrets and be courageous. Only somebody who has the qualities of heroism can say this. She always uttered the word brave with great emphasis. She always uttered the word brave with great emphasis. And she tried to explain in various ways, through several examples, what brave implies. And whom do we call brave? And one day, some students were reading about the life of Columbus from an English textbook in her presence. And while reading the account of Columbus's extraordinary tenacity, Nivedita became quite emotional. She says, the ship was traversing endless seas. No land was in sight for miles. Supplies of food and water were dwindling rapidly. The sailors were growing mutinous. But Columbus remained steadfast and determined in his aim. Even under such adverse conditions, she says, his mind did not lose its tranquility. She now gives a whole example of what she considers to be an ideal in some regard. However, while reading this portion, Nivedita's face flushed with excitement as she said, Columbus was a great and brave man. That day's reading ended there, but the following day, while reading about the cruel manner in which Columbus treated the Aboriginal tribes, she couldn't continue the narration, but closed the book saying, earlier Columbus was a courageous man, but later he became a great villain. Can you see the difference? She then changed the subject and began to talk about the bravery of the Rajput warriors. And she said, him I call a hero, whose strong arms have the capacity to counter any danger or adversity, but who has equally the capacity to support and succor friend and foe alike, with a heart melting with compassion. The brave-hearted only think of others. They never care for their own sorrows or grievances. It's worth repeating. The brave-hearted only think of others. These are the true heroes and heroines. They never care for their own sorrows or grievances. And when the Rajput warriors gave up their lives on the battlefield, they never spared the least thought for themselves. They were only worried lest the children and weaker ones suffer at the hands of the enemy. And furthermore, in terms of heroines, when the Rajput princesses gave up their lives and plunged into the pit of fire, did they even cry out in pain as they were burnt alive? And on the contrary, without giving a thought to their agony, in order to give strength and support to their husbands and sons, they would sing songs of bravery and go smiling to their fiery death. Then she says, all of you must become like them. Don't forget, she's talking to girls in a girls' school. All of you must be like these princesses. It's not that you should jump in the fire, but the spirit of it you should take. The Kshatriyas, that is the military, are known for such deeds of valor. She then says, "O you daughters of India, learn to be like those Kshatriyas. Follow their example. Make them your ideal." Now, throughout the Indian literature, we only find the glory of the Kshatriyas. The glory of the Kshatriyas, the military people. All the deities hold military weapons, and all the Brahmins bow down to them. So it is the Kshatriya caste who really
fight the wars.
Well, and also revised what the Brahmanas were saying. In other words, if the religion becomes a Brahmanism that is dominated by priests, then the prophets have to take over. That's the idea. And the whole struggle is that Jesus had the same struggle.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and Nivedita would also sometimes question the girls on certain parts of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. And while discussing the story of Kacha and Devyani, Nivedita would go into rapture saying that Kacha was a man of supreme valor. How wonderful it is to possess such bravery. And again, while speaking of Devyani, she would become subdued and sometimes ashamed, as though her weakness of character was her own. She would say, "How could the daughter of Shukracharya be of such mean conduct? I cannot understand how women can behave in this manner." Not only did she exhibit all the qualities that she was teaching, but she taught others from the cultural background that they maybe didn't even understand, but had to be educated in. So she says, amongst the women characters of the Mahabharata, who is the bravest, she asks all her students. And most of the students, they answered Draupadi, while a few felt that it was Subhadra, because she had drawn Arjun's chariot and so on. But Kunti was mentioned by one or two girls as she reminded Bhima to rush to the rescue during the fight with the demon. Those who have studied the Mahabharata would understand this. But no one thought of mentioning Gandhari, who voluntarily put a scarf or a cloth around her eyes because her husband was blind. And in order to support her husband and to understand with empathy what he was going through, she put herself voluntarily under the same conditions. That truly is a heroine, combining heart and will. And when she said this, Nivedita had searched the face of each and every student, hoping for the answer she was expecting, and finally told them herself. In the Mahabharata, many brave women are found, but the foremost among them is Dhritarashtra's consort, Gandhara Devi. And although at one time she had felt envious of Kunti's good fortune, this flaw was also wiped out by her subsequent contact. She was a wife who was so devoted to her husband and so very courageous that she chose to have her eyes bound for life, simply because her husband was blind. Yet she did not condone her husband's unjustifiable actions either. She had a sense of justice and asserted herself, as Sister Nivedita herself did. Now imagine Sister Nivedita in the face of the British Raj, who considered that she may have been consorting with the natives in their view, their colonialist language, and yet defying the government, who opened her letters, and she would write to them saying, "Look, I don't mind opening your letters, that you seem to have a very curious interest in the affairs of my sister who writes to me. But please do me the courtesy of closing the letter nicely when you've finished." Then, of course, many, many hardships she went through. But she was unique in her destiny because all or many of the details that we know of Swami Vivekananda are gained to us, are given to us, gifted to us by Sister Nivedita. On the journey to the West, the last journey that she and Swami Purnananda and Swami Vivekananda traveled. She gained such insights, and there's only one person who ever authored a biography of Swami Vivekananda. That was Sister Nivedita, the master as I saw him. There we have such great, great, profound insights into the character, the thoughts of this great man, Swami Vivekananda, who was heroic enough to shake up the whole world. His heroism, of course, is immediately noticeable by others at the Parliament of Religions, where 7,000 people responded immediately to his opening words. But in the same way, Sister Nivedita had a presence, and people listened to her, respected her, valued her, and she was bold enough to assert her support for those who were against the British Raj. She was significant a presence enough to make a protest of the separation of East and West Bengal by the British government. And she was extremely vocal in her support of Indian art, Indian culture, science. She was such a supporter of Jagadish Chandra Bose, writing his papers for him, and generally exposing Indian culture, the ancient Indian culture, as she understood it to be in its authentic form, gaining all this information from Swami Vivekananda himself. She was, of course, not just highly educated, she was extraordinarily intelligent. And I think there are a few who have as deep an understanding as she of human character. And while getting to know Swami Vivekananda, more closely, she also understood that he was outstanding, not only by virtue of his learning, but his command of philosophy and the sheer brilliance of his personality. And surely she would take this on board. You know, it's no accident that we have certain designated teachers where we can emulate. It was noticeable that Ramakrishna's spiritual son, who became Swami Brahmananda, was so much like Ramakrishna himself that people looking at him walking from the back would think that this was the master Ramakrishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, people of steady wisdom, the question is asked, how do they walk? How do they talk? How do they behave in general? It's a wonderful meditation. We can sit down for hours and contemplate our Ishtadevata, or the cosmic balancing power as it appears as an avatar or a saintly person, and wonder, how is it that they walked? How did they talk? Can I imagine walking with them? What will they say to me? It's a wonderful exercise if you want certain qualities. That is to sit down and have an imaginary conversation. Let us say you want the qualities of leadership. You take some historical leader and you sit down and ask him, how did you manage this? How did you manage that? We can also sit down with Swami Vivekananda. We can sit down with Sister Nivedita and understand her and say, well, how was it when you first went to India? What did you find? What were your biases, which you had? And how did that get removed? And what did it feel like to work with the women, even against opposition, even when you knocked on doors and had the door slammed in your face, and you were spurned as mlecha, dirty foreigner, and spurned by the English as a sellout? How did you feel? And how did you recover? And how did you recover to such an extent that you made a significant impact on the landscape of India and also outside India? So this remarkable woman, Sister Nivedita, I consider to be a true heroine, and perhaps over the next few weeks we can explore various dimensions of her life and her life's work. Some other random offerings from this book. The student says the unique bond between Sister Nivedita and India was quite wonderful. So I should mention here that we should all take on board a magnificent obsession, something that gives us this passion, this heart, that makes us also heroic. Leaving a well-established position in England, a prosperous country with a highly civilized society, she came and spent an unobtrusive life of poverty in a country that was perennially plagued by disasters. Could any of us do it easily? What a contrast there was between the life of comfort and fortune that she had led there in England, full of honor and esteem. She was regarded for her intellectual prowess and for her writings. She was influential even then and moved amongst influential circles. That was the stature of her personality. She was a lioness always, but her lioness status increased dramatically after meeting Swami Vivekananda. And she says, and the sad, inconspicuous existence occasionally fraught with criticism and humiliation that she led here in India, she means. Let us examine that. Occasionally, her life fraught with criticism and humiliation. Many of us would simply react negatively. But she had one of the key characteristics of heroism, namely, she had forbearance. It's a quality we call titiksha, forbearance under all circumstances. She left behind her protection of family and friends to embrace a set of values and customs which were ever so far removed from her own. Such a brave step. She mingled with a people speaking languages quite different from her own, professing a diametrically opposite lifestyle, and possessing a character totally at variance with her own. You see, if you come with that kind of destiny and intention, if you come with a mission to a foreign land, you should at least live as they live. You should at least understand how they think. You should at least adopt the customs that are present there. You should be one of them. Absolutely. I'll always remember my dear philosophy teacher, Swami Nisarsananda. He determined when he came to the country in Africa that he would be a citizen of that country, no less. He wouldn't waver on the border. He made a commitment. And his impact was tremendous because he understood Africa. In this same way, Sister Nivedita is understanding thoroughly by living the life of an Indian and writing the book, The Web of Indian Life. What a remarkable book that was. Understanding the whole history of India in remarkable detail and the day-to-day customs, the web. You see, the key is in the title. It's a web of Indian life. The difference between her two worlds was marked by as great a contrast as that between the high Himalayas and the rivers flowing towards the sea. And you cannot but wonder which power or Shakti propelled Sister Nivedita's life in the new direction. In the book that I referred to, the biography of Swami Vivekananda, written by her, the master as I saw him, Sister Nivedita has revealed that it was her meeting with this great Swami which directly led to the change in her life. None of these things are accidents. We meet significant people who will become living milestones in our life, not by accident, but not by mere random good fortune, but by design, because there is a divine unfolding within us all, pushing us in the most favorable direction. And so, as I mentioned, it was in 1895 when Swami Vivekananda happened to go to England to preach the message of Vedanta. This is this work that we are all doing. This is the work that she also did. And Sister Nivedita developed an interest in Indian religion and philosophical thought. She already was studying some Buddhism. And as was his practice, Swami Vivekananda, would first deliver his lecture on a Vedantic theme. And then he would answer questions. And after listening to these lectures and the answers that the Swami gave, to the entire satisfaction of everyone present, Nivedita began to reflect on European philosophies and religious practices and compare them with Indian philosophy and religion. I was talking the other day with somebody on philosophy and such, and making a distinction, seeing how actually Indian philosophy was not readily accepted by universities as a subject. It was so different from, let us say, the German philosophers or the classical Greek philosophers. All this was more a question of intellectual posturing, gymnastics, several theories or hypotheses that were gone through. And one of them, of course, in more recent times, is what's called logical positivism. I don't accept anything that I cannot experience. Finished. And though she could not then fully fathom the import of Vedantic thought as presented by Swami, she nonetheless felt that in spite of some genuine spiritual inspiration behind the preoccupation of contemporary European culture with its social, religious, and charitable activity, it was mostly a worldly matter for the sake of enjoyment. But true spirituality, she would know, was still far removed from worldly life. And if there is selfishness or a vested interest in benevolent or charitable work, then that work is as fruitless as a barren tree. And Sister Nivedita soon realized this truth from the Swami's talks and religious discussions, and the idea took a firm hold on her mind. And that was the other contributing factor. And in this manner, by listening to his works and constantly turning them over and over in her thoughts, that is really the method. Delivering a talk, let us say, which comes from some kind of inner inspiration and catches the attention of some people who don't really understand it on first listening, yet go away, and after a week or so, they come back. I always tell the story, and I'll tell it again, because I'm not tired of repeating, how in the early days here, two people visited, constantly attending the talks. And I think we held some of those talks in Sinatra, the ecology center near Bettystown. And after a while, one of them never came. And I asked his friend, where is so-and-so? He says, I can't understand a word that this man says. I'm not coming again, ever. And the other person, I asked, well, do you understand? He said, no, I also don't understand. But I'm coming, and I'll come again repeatedly until I do understand. And that's the difference between these two. So you pick up a flavor of the idea that is churned around and given the freedom to churn these ideas around in your head until an aha moment comes and said, I have it, I've got it. And so Nivedita's heart underwent a gradual transformation, and with it came a feeling of deep reverence for Swami Vivekananda. And so that was one of the keys. And we refer to Sister Nivedita really as, well, I do anyway, as a Celtic lioness. And I don't think it's an accident that Swami Vivekananda saw her as a lioness as well. Nivedita's character, in her character, we can see alertness similar to that of a warrior in battle, bringing out her heroism. And once she had seized an idea, she understood it clearly, without any doubt, without any confusion about its implications. And then she would try intensively and at every moment to put it into action. like an alert soldier ready for battle. It was for this reason that there was not the least discrepancy between her words and actions. Her reverence for humanity was her basic faith. She fervently wished that human beings should be true to themselves and live up to the highest human standards. And whenever and in whomsoever she found the flowering of real human virtues, her head would bow down with great respect. She paid her utmost reverence to the elderly Hindu lady whom she saw on the banks of the Alakananda River, immersed in offering prayers, although it was a chilly winter's day and her clothes were wet from bathing. But equally, she admired and sincerely respected the Muslim lady, about whom Swamiji has written in one of his books, who, when asked by him which faith she belonged to, he replied, "By the grace of Allah, I am a Muslim." I want to repeat that. You see, one of our objects is this reverence that was exhibited by by Sri Ramakrishna, who uniquely experienced every bhava, every expression, and every religion, including Islam. And during that period, he became literally a Muslim. And so, look at how Swami Vivekananda deals with the Muslim lady. So, the Muslim lady, about Swami, has written in one of his books, when asked by him which faith she belongs to, replied, "By the grace of Allah, I am a Muslim." In Nivedita, we find a deep love for the values of society, but an equally deep distaste for bigoted ideas. Her personal, single-minded devotion led her to see divinity everywhere and in everyone, and therein lies the simple clue and the simple key to the whole of spiritual life if it's to be meaningful. And it was her guru who had given her the inspiration for such a unique, heightened perception of the truth. Shankaracharya, the great Vedantist and veritable form of Lord Shiva, proclaimed, "Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham," and yet sung fervent devotional hymns in praise of the holy images of Sri Jagannath, Govinda, Narayana, Annapurna, Vishwanath, and so on, and even of the holy rivers Ganga and Yamuna. It is this breadth which is not easily understood by many, and is the offering, the unique offering to the world. And Sister Nivedita was part of this universal dissemination. Being the true disciple of her guru, she followed in her master's footsteps and succeeded in the flawless performance of ritual worship as a lifelong sacrifice. And if she heard that Shashti Puja had been performed under the banyan tree, she would immediately make pranams, prostrating herself full length under the tree, not caring a bit for people's opinion. The very mention of puja would bring a flood of devotional feelings to her heart. So what we find in somebody is somebody who gathered all her energy and directed it in an unequaled way for the higher cause of humanity in her specialist and specialized area, with such a diversity of talent that her interests were broader to art, to science, to education, to national upliftment, and ultimately to the divine insight, where she saw this divinity in every being. She truly had the heart of a heroine. Now, I want these Tuesday sessions to be as interactive as we have had maybe in the past history of our society, where we sat together and we had Blessington Street and so on. And so I'm going to reserve the next 7 minutes for some interaction.
Did Sister Nivedita, did she try and bring the Western, her own Christianity to India as well.
Absolutely not.
She didn't, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And yet she herself was committed Christian all through. She felt that there was this eternal link with Christianity. So that's the point, you see. Christianity, Islam, and all these religions, organized or not, are simply expressions of two things. Firstly, how you access the divinity in your own individual way, which involves your cultural way. And secondly, how you express it. But that shifted because once she understood in India what was valid there and what was valuable there, and understood very intimately, more even than possibly the Indians who were practicing their religion, that she saw the sacredness in it and was quite happy to adopt puja, as we've seen. Not only that, but encourage all the children to sing such patriotic songs as Vande Mataram and so on. See, patriotic songs. And to teach the children to have faith in themselves in an environment that encouraged self-degradation, not only culturally for women to be self-degraded, but the Indian citizenry to be self-denigrated as well, because they were under colonial rule. And it's in the interest of the colonialist to keep everybody down. You do that by making them feel inferior. Yes, 500 years of what you had here, absolutely. So, yeah.
I was very interested earlier, you mentioned about Jesus found himself in a place where the priests had taken over religion.
Yeah.
And a prophet then has to step in. I was really popped out like that. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Absolutely. So the Judaism of the time was divided into various sectarian divisions. The Sadducees, as we know, the Sadducees had no concept of afterlife. They didn't believe in afterlife, but the Pharisees did. And that's one of the main distinctions between them. The Sadducees were involved in the temple ritual and so on. But of course, there was an element of materialism there. So you do all the rituals. Now, one of the great temple rituals was that at the Feast of Passover, you offer a lamb.
And you paint the blood on the doorway, isn't it?
That was the original thing there, yes. So you offer a lamb, but inevitably you go there and you have a commercial setup that says, you want to offer the best, your lamb is not so great. We can offer you a good lamb here, at a good price and so on. So there's a whole commercial area around the temple.
Mm-hmm. That's what Jesus drove out.
And this is what Jesus' objection was, you see.
Pardon?
His objection was like that, you see. Yeah. So he was going into an area where there was commercialism.
Den of Thieves, I think he called it.
Yes. You find that everywhere where you go on pilgrimage. Whether you go to temples in India or the Vatican or
people selling stuff.
There'll always be a clockwork plastic Virgin Mary that is available for purchase in the Vatican and so on. There'll always be peddlers of holy things. So there's an element of commercialism there, but also the element of ritualism, which is meaningless. And laws, you can't, I'm going to make fun a little bit, I'm sorry. The sneeze on the Sabbath was prohibited. No, it wasn't literally, but I'm giving you the idea, you see. And Jesus said, no, you can pick corn on the Sabbath. You can, he gives the example, if your sheep, falls into a crevasse, will you leave it there because it's the Sabbath, or you rescue the poor thing, you see. So in other words, you bring a spirit to this, you have some rationale. Now, the Bhagavad Gita says that knowledge is better than mere action, mere ritualism. Ritualism is okay, but to do it with some understanding is better. To do it with meditation is even better. And then to offer the fruits of your actions is even better. So this is this gradation that is found there. It's found in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
But the Pharisees...
So Jesus found himself, Jesus was Pharisaic because he also believed in the afterlife. But the problem was that the Pharisees also had this ritualism, and
but it was self-aggrandized. They wanted to. It was an ego. They wanted to be bowed down to in the streets.
The example is the Pharisee standing there at the front of the synagogue. How, at least I'm not a sinner. Blah blah blah, and the small man sitting at the back, humbly asking forgiveness and so on.
Jesus hated that hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy, no, exactly hypocrisy. So wherever there is this senseless, it's really an exertion of power by those who are in control, and these are largely the priests of religion. And it requires a balancing cosmic power to come in and restore dharma, as it's called, because adharma is sometimes there in the name of religion itself. So all of these are great reformers. Shankaracharya was a reformer. Krishna was a reformer.
Saint Patrick.
Saint Patrick was brought. He brought in really the idea of Christianity, seeing some of the maybe some of the crude ways of the people that he'd experienced as a slave. And so he saw the answer in Christianity, and a way of explaining the Trinity, for example, a very complex theological prospect, in such a simple way, with a shamrock, you can see there's one stem, but there are 3 leaves on it. It's quite a natural thing, see, to understand it in this way. And it wasn't that the people were suddenly converted. It took about 200 years for the people to go toward Christianity and join them. And we can see the advantages of that because it was a united thing. It was a uniting thing. It was a compassionate thing. It was an organized thing, a uniting thing, and so on. All of these things were there. And then there were the character of the great heroes that we call saints, who had the heart. And that's the thing.
Saint Bridget.
Yes. So all of those. And fortunately, we have a day dedicated to Saint Bridget also. And this is a great thing because in modern times, we are now acknowledging Saint Bridget, her feminine heroism, the fact that she's a heroine, equally with Saint Patrick, a hero. In the Irish eyes, anyway. Which are smiling, as we know.
Sorry?
In the Irish eyes, which, as we know, are smiling.
Smiling, yeah.
I think there's a song.
When Irish eyes are smiling.
That's fine. Okay.
After smiling next Saturday after they play New Zealand.
Oh, yes. Okay. As you heard online anyway, we're all talking about the rugby finals, the Rugby World Cup, which I have a considerable interest in because, you see, with all of this philosophy, the practical side of it is, if we do not view this world in the same way that we view a sport, a team sport, then we'll have a tough time of it.
Take it too seriously, isn't it?
Yeah. And it is tough. Why is it tough? Because it's a game. Because you cannot have a good game of rugby without a good opposition, and without good skills, and without toughness and enthusiasm, and a central objective. So all of these things are necessary. Well, good night to all of you. Thank you. And we'll see you anon, wherever anon is. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.